Okay, good day. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday. It is me, Derek, with No Dog Left Behind. Today, I want to talk about a few things in episode 22 of the Everyday Dog Show. I don't know why this is mirrored that way, backwards, son of a gun. But anyhow, so episode 22, I want to chat about my thoughts about invisible or underground fences, as well as some considerations and thoughts when it comes to meeting an unknown or new dog. To begin with, hashtag live if you're seeing this now, pretty please, and or hashtag replay if you want to are watching this later. Now, another thing to be mindful of is just shoot me a comment on this post if you have any suggestions of content you'd like me to share with you, or my thoughts or considerations on things. But anyways, without further ado, I had a question come in about a person struggling with their dog staying on their property and like launching off of it and going and getting into stuff. And the question of what do I think about invisible fences came up. So there's a lot to consider, really. Okay. Like initially, not really a fan in general. There's some reasons why that is. I mean, but there's also exceptions where I'm like, well, your options are pretty limited. You might want to consider it, I guess. But the biggest things we have to be mindful of is what you're trying to actually do. Okay. So for example, I'll outline, let's just say, a circumstance where a person has their dog leaving their property on an acreage and they're going to see the neighbor dogs and they won't, stay in the yard. And it's like, what have you been doing? The first things are we need to consider, why is the dog leaving? Okay, so is it prey drive based? Is it mating based? Like, is the dog intact and is trying to go get fresh with the neighbor's dogs? Is it bored and lonely because you're not there? So those are some things I would take under consideration. I will quickly say I haven't seen many cases whatsoever that I would ever advise a dog having an invisible fence in town if their yard is fenced. Or as an alternative, my preference would be the yard being fenced, because there's issues that I will raise soon as why I feel that way. But anyways, so let's pretend that your dog is leaving your acreage a lot and you want to keep them on the land so they don't get run over by a car or something, or shot by the neighbor who really doesn't want your dog on their property and impregnating his female dogs. Fair enough. So in that circumstance, one piece would be like, well, I don't necessarily need an invisible fence if I, kind of address the root issue of my dog has a sex drive and needs to get neutered, with the inclusion of, getting the dog accustomed to staying on your land by, perhaps keeping it in an enclosure or tethering it when you're around to make sure it doesn't like hang itself, or if it's trustworthy, as well as walking it around the property. For instance, if you invested the appropriate amount of time and you tried to do it proactively and it just didn't work for you, then I'd be like, okay, well, you could consider an invisible fence. But what I would do is hire one of the companies that actually install it and do the training with you, versus just like buying one without anyone leading you how to do it. Because at least those entities tend to have a better idea of how to acclimate the dog to understand its limits, and would have some experience doing so. The other piece of it is that you have to be mindful of what you're trying to achieve, right? So it makes pretty simple sense. I don't want my dog to leave to go to the neighbors and get run over by a car or get shot. But if you're living in like, say at the lake or something, and you want an invisible fence to keep your dog in the yard because it goes and attacks the neighbor dog, or, chases bunnies and so forth, it's going to be a little bit different, because the invisible fence doesn't keep stuff out. So like, that's a reason why I'm like, if it's in town, I'm like, put a fence up. I'm like, if your dog has issues with prey, a prey drive, or issues with dogs, the dogs can still come into your yard if there's an invisible fence at your lake property or in town. So if you're just hypothetically, let's pretend your dog's barking at the other dog walking by, and your dog stays behind the fence line, the invisible fence line, but that other dog could be like, take offense to it and come in and attack your dog, and your dog's still, in the shit, so to speak. So that's not necessarily going to remedy the issue, because you're just essentially keeping the dog in your yard which is the next piece, is like, am I addressing the underlying root issue of the behavior? And that would not be, it would potentially keep my dog in my yard, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to bark at a passing dog. So another thing to consider is some dogs will calculate, okay, it hurts if I go over it, but once I'm over it, it stops. It really depends on the device, because I think some might continue or do multiple stimulation, whatever, shocks or whatever you want to call it, if they go over the boundary, or some will just do it once they break over that threshold. And some dogs are willing to accept that stimulus or stimulation to go over to the thing. So it's not like a guarantee either. So for example, with the case with, I was talking about with the acreage and the dogs leaving that acreage to go see the neighbor dogs because one of them's in heat and it can smell it. I mean, he might be like, it sucks and it hurts, but I'm going to do it. And they jump over it and then he's like, oh, what's up, neighbor girls? And he's going and flirting and trying to make some friends. So it's not necessarily going to work by default, but it can, right? So that's where typically when a company is hired, they would do some preliminary work where essentially you expose the dog to the barrier and the dog's going to get some feedback, if you will, when it gets too close, to try to help the dog. Everything is safe in here, but if you go around this area, it's not good for you. And that's just essentially what you're trying to convey to the dog. So the next piece coming back is, same deal with the prey drive, right? So if your dog has a really high prey drive, an underground fence isn't necessarily going to stop them, because if their prey drive is higher than their pain drive or tolerance, they're going to be like, and then they jump over and they go and kill the thing or chase it or run away or whatever. So it's not a guarantee, but obviously if it was installed, you have some kind of indication that they're going to not, potentially from the tech or whoever you're working with to do the thing. So the other piece is that, well, what do you want your dog? How do you want your dog to respond to you off leash? Because if you want your dog to reliably respond to you off leash, regardless of the environment, the underground fence is not going to do anything for that. It's really just kind of for that specific area, right? So let's say you're at the lake and you go for a walk and you go for a hike off leash. Your dog is not going to necessarily listen to you whatsoever, because now the barrier's gone and you have no control over them, because in the yard, the control was created with something outside of you that prompts the dog to not leave. So it doesn't mean that they learned how to listen to you off leash. So once again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just like, what are you weighing? What do you want? And what does this provide? So for instance, if you wanted your dog to be quite responsive off leash to you, regardless of the environment you're in, you have to do more work and training. So for instance, back to the lake, idea is, let's say your dog runs off your property because it likes to go and visit the neighbor dog. Well, if I wanted to do more like off leash training, what I would do is start doing long leash training, where I would have the dog learn its boundary by me being outside with it on a long leash. And if I was unable to be outside with it and somewhat monitoring, I would just, leave the dog inside, or I'd put it in a pen or something outside. So the only times it has the freedom to make its choice is when I'm there to stop it and give the dog better idea of boundaries and rules. Because this is something I learned. It's irrelevant what you do to the dog after it's run away from you and you catch it. It makes no difference. It doesn't help them listen better in the future. So it's just too far removed. Like, I need to catch my dog in the moment when they're thinking about doing the thing. So let's just pretend you have this imaginary boundary on your lot and you're like, I don't want you going over that, dog. And your dog runs over because it wants to go see some prey, squirrels, right? And you're like, uh-oh. So then they start running. I yell, hey, and I stop the dog with the long leash before they get over the barrier. And the dog's like, oh, I can't do it. And I'm like, no, get away, go. And then I get them to come back. And then I essentially put a stop block in front of their cycle of stimulus response, meaning I see squirrel, I chase that squirrel. Well, then once you get a few reps of that, it's like, I see squirrel, I want to chase it. Wait, what's Derek doing? Oh, is he watching? And I'm like, no. And they're like, and then they walk around and they go away. But the dog can't have fun doing the thing, chasing the thing, running away, etc. If I want my dog to have that off-leash reliability, right? So if you want more like consistent off-leash reliability, it's just, I think you'd be better off to like hire someone to get the assistance to teach that, instead of simply kind of have an underground fence for your specific area. But if you're like, I really don't care about that, I just want my dog to not leave my property, then I'm like, well, okay, I mean, fair enough. Then you might have success with that type of thing. But once again, if your dog has like fear or excitement or whatever issues with prey or other dogs, it doesn't stop those things from coming into your lot. Now, the other thing to consider, and this is not going to happen with all dogs, but it does happen, is sometimes if your dog is like, you can start off with your dog's happy-go-lucky and flirty and curious, and it's on this, say, my side of the invisible fence. And it runs up to the invisible fence because the dog's walking by, and it's like, oh my God, hi doggy, what's up? And then it gets too close to the line because it forgets itself and gets shocked while it's looking at the other dog. And then, maybe they take a step back and they're like, and then they kind of follow the dog and stay back. After a handful of circumstances, it could be 1 to 6, or more, who knows, the dog can start to anticipate a negative feeling or physical pain or discomfort or whatever it is with the visible stimulus of what they see. So they start to like be like, oh my God, it's a doggy. And then they run to the line of the fence. And if they get too close, they get shocked. And then what they saw, they start to associate, that thing makes me hurt. So sometimes it actually can create an issue in a social dog or a friendly dog, because the dog starts to anticipate physical discomfort with the thing that they're seeing. It's really quite similar to how some dogs get leash reactive. So for example, you can have a dog that, let's just highlight a scenario. You've got a puppy, you're raising a puppy. It's maybe, between 2 months to 6 months, you're introducing it to all these dogs on leash on your walks because you're trying to socialize it. And then at 6 months, it starts getting bigger and pulling more. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this pulling. And the dog's driving me wild when it's walking past other dogs. And you're like, I got to stop introducing it. So then maybe try a prong collar or something because someone suggests this to you. And then you're going down on your walks, and guess what's happening? You've unintentionally conditioned your dog to get excited and anticipate dogs it sees, it gets access to. Because anytime, whatever the dog's doing before you let them have the thing, for example, going to see the other dog, you reinforce. So over that, 3 months of introducing your dog to other dogs on leash to try to socialize them, you're reinforcing, say, pulling or jumping or barking when you're on your way to that dog. Now you say, no more of that. This sucks. I don't like it. And then your dog kind of flips out and reacts and does all these things. And you've got the collar and you're trying to control him and interrupt the undesirable behavior. Fair enough. But what can happen is the dog starts to associate frustration because I can't get the thing, number one, and then 2, pain when they see the thing. So then it can actually create leash reactivity issues because now the dog sees other dogs and naturally it's excited to go see them. But when it pulls, it gets the prongs deeper embedded, towards its neck, and it's uncomfortable or painful. I don't know. Whatever the dog feels, it depends on the severity of them running. But that physical discomfort, let's say, gets associated with what their eyes are seeing, which is the other dog. So through 5, 10, 15, 30, 40 repetitions of that day after day walking, trying to leash control your dog and get them to walk on a loose leash, your dog starts to get progressively worse at reacting and earlier when it sees other dogs. You're like, how did this happen? My dog was so friendly before. Now it's spitting and snarling and acting like a Tasmanian devil on this leash, and I'm scared to introduce it. And sometimes that's kind of what happens. And the reason I know this is because I did it with one of my dogs, not knowing at the time, where it's like I was walking and my dog's like interested and looking, and I at the time was like, oh, leash pop, because that's what was popular, and I was taught to interrupt any undesirable behavior, which is her not walking well on a leash. And then I did something which is essentially created a negative association with dogs because she started to expect punishment and felt uncomfortable when she would see dogs because of what I was doing. So needless to say, I know different now and I know better now. And I'm always like, okay, well, we can teach them to walk nice. But we have to be careful about how we do it so we don't have any unintended, undesirable side effects. So that's why the emphasis is on positive and gentle. Everything's not positive, but I can most of the time be quite gentle. So anyways, back to full circle of invisible fence or not. I mean, it's really relative. I would just speak to whatever kind of assistance or person you trust and get their opinion if you're not a fan of mine. Or, you know, if you wanted to learn more about like off leash control and how to teach that, that is definitely something that we do and can help with. And I can facilitate that if you're wanting your dog to more consistently respond in general, off leash and in your area. So that's that. Now to move on, crack. That was just my body cracking. Anyways, oh yeah, it was how to greet an unknown dog. The biggest thing I can tell you is an absence of a friendly greeting from an unknown dog should make you tread lightly. So I deal with this all the time. So let's pretend you go to your friend's house and the dog's like, you walk inside and the dog's like 10 feet away at you, kind of looking at you. I'm like, is it friendly? Does it look happy-go-lucky? No. Like it's not wiggling like, hi, what's up? I want to touch you. And it runs up and is goofy and silly and rubbing up against you. That's a friendly greeting. And you can tell those two if the dog's on leash because they're like wiggling out of their skin and they can't help themselves. They're like soft and wavy versus a dog who's like rigid and stiff, and like barking is a piece of it. And so is tail wagging, but it's not the whole piece. It's relative to how they're doing it. So like if a dog is rigid and they're staring at me and their tail is wagging like this, not good. I'm like, just going to stay still. Dog approaches me, sniffs me. I don't try to pet it or nothing because the dog is on edge, and I've identified that. So a very common one is like present the fist. And I'm like, well, yeah, that can be okay, but I wouldn't advise it. Like dogs have really good scent. Just let them sniff your leg. Don't present the fist to them. Just because what I'm looking for when I come into a home is, one, is the dog getting silly and happy and goofy and excited to see me, or are they rushing at me because they want to sniff me really close? And just because the dog is in your personal space bubble does not mean they're ready to be touched. I'm really looking for like a friendly, soft, waggy, silly, flirty kind of behavior to know whether or not I should actually touch the dog. So like my suggestion here is anytime you see an absence of goofy, happy-go-lucky, friendly behavior, tread lightly and don't reach out to pet the dog. Let the dog investigate you, sniff you, walk around you, and then when they walk away, you go and sit down in your friend's house or you walk away or whatever. But if the dog like sniffs you, does the thing, and sits beside you and is like leaning into you, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty safe to say you can pet the dog and they would like it. Or if the dog's nudging at your hands, like, come on, pet me, sir. Then I'd be like, okay, sweetie. But people really don't realize how much information is in the dog's body language if you know what to look for. So the biggest thing is like happy, flirty, or rigid, stiff. So if the dog is physically rigid or stiff, they are mentally too, which means they're not going to be super receptive to me engaging with them. So that's why I tread lightly. But yeah, like I typically don't present my hand ever to a dog, because what you might not understand or recognize is that dogs who suffer with like fear or distrust or anxiety directed towards people, they have specific things that trigger them to feel further uncomfortable than they already do by your presence just being there. And some of those triggers are movement, trying to touch, eye contact, and petting. So if the dog rushes up to you because you came through the door, that doesn't mean they like you. They just want to investigate you. So when I am rushed, I'm like looking away. I'm not really moving. I'm waiting, letting them sniff me. And then when they walk away, I do too. So that could be a simple way to kind of gauge where the dog is at. So anyways, I hope that's been somewhat insightful, and it's definitely safe. I've been in lots of spicy situations and stood there and just let the dog investigate me, and then they left. Now sometimes it's more than that, but I won't bother getting into that because that's an entire different discussion. But for the mass majority of situations you're going to encounter, or your children, is like the old be a tree, like look away, be still, let the dog investigate you, and then they walk away. And then sometimes I'll call the dog, come here. And if they come to me, but then they stop 1 to 5 feet short of me and they're out of reach, I'm like, oh, you don't want to be touched. Copy that. And I just take my time, and I wait till they are in my personal space bubble, like right in there with their body, not just their nose, and they're physically loose too. So I hope this has been insightful. By all means, don't forget to join our closed group, the Everyday Dog Training Secrets. I've got tons of trainings under the guides tab in there. And other than that, have a wonderful Friday and weekend. Till next time.